It is now 6:05 on February the 16th, 2021. I'd like to call this meeting to order. We'll start with our invocation. If we can ask Commissioner Sanders if you would mind doing our prayer, and if Commissioner Edwards, if you can lead us in the pledge.
Father God, in the precious name of Jesus, I thank you for this day. I thank you for the life and breath that we have upon us. I thank you for allowing us to serve your people, the people that you have given us the opportunity to just minister to and through all of the government as well as everything that needs to be done, God. We are coming today, Lord, to speak for your people and making sure that our vote counts and that whatever we do, when we do decide, we do it not selfishly, but just for the people that we serve. In your name we pray. Amen.
Thank you. I did want to make known that Commissioner Cowan will be joining us today via phone since he's not able to actually be here in person. So if you hear another voice via phone, that's Commissioner Cowan joining us today. So now we're going to adopting the agenda. I'm sure we all have had an opportunity to review the agenda today. So I seek a motion to adopt today's agenda.
So moved.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Commissioner Cowan, are you in favor?
I'm in favor.
Commissioner Cowan is in favor. All that oppose? So the agenda adoption passes 5-0. All right, agenda item number 4, the approval of the Public Facility Authority's meeting minutes dated January the 19th, 2021. I seek a motion, and I'm sure you all have had an opportunity to review those minutes from the previous meeting. So I seek a motion to approve the minutes from January 19, 2021. Thank you, sir.
Second.
Thank you, ma'am. So we have a motion to approve and a second. All in favor? Commissioner Cowan?
I'm in favor.
Commissioner Cowan is in favor. All opposed? The approval of the PFA minutes dated January 19, 2021 have passed. Item number 5, which is a discussion of alternative funding sources, grants, state level funding, et cetera, for districts 2, 3, and 4 projects. And I believe that'll be Mr. Kerr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did, after our meeting, I did task the two folks from the Recreation Department, the Director, Dwayne Mask, and his assistant, Cale Curtis, to begin researching anything that they could find on recreation grants. And what they found, included in your packet is a memo from me along with some of the sources that they found. They actually found quite a bit more. However, we didn't include everything in there. As the memo states, the ones that I'm giving you or showing you there were some of the ones that were at least more relevant in terms of grant funding. What they found is that there are available grants for trails. Trails are a very popular topic right now. As a matter of fact, the Georgia Department of Natural Resources has quite a large amount of grant funding for trails, and the application for those is in this will be this fall, August, September. And so that's going to be a possible source for us to definitely take a look for some trail development. We have some property in District 3 that we just acquired, was donated to us during the past year. And so it could be developed for walking trails, and so we would be able to utilize that money. But a lot of the grant funding that we found, there was a fair amount of funding that is out there for exercise equipment, playground equipment, equipment and furnishings, for want of a better term, for things like community centers or gymnasiums, things of that nature. What we didn't find was money for vertical construction. There are some programs that do allow for, or that will provide money for construction of buildings, but they're not purely recreational in nature, more for community-type centers. That funding is fairly limited. We are looking at, of course, and have taken a look at CDBG, Community Development Block Fund grant funding. We also looked at corporate funding. There's quite a few corporations out there that do have corporate funding. The larger corporations, we found, interestingly, were by invitation, and that was those corporations reaching out to the individual jurisdictions and asking them to apply. The other thing on private grants was that the majority of those grants are for 501c3s, nonprofit organizations, religious organizations, and so forth. The other thing, too, that I wanted to mention and say is, all grants have a funding cycle, and applications are typically 6 to 8 months prior to when the awards are given. We have missed the deadlines for most 2021 grants. The deadlines for applications typically are in the early part of the year, the April through the summer. So there may be some opportunities there that have been missed. But the other thing I want to stress is that because there is grant funding available does not necessarily mean that we would receive a grant. Grants are typically, they're always competitive. Some grants are statewide, some of them are regional. The federal grants are almost always national competition. So we may be competing with 10 other people looking for grant money. We may be competing with hundreds. So just a couple of things there. I did take a look at ACCG services. They provide essentially, for want of a better way to explain it, is a lease purchase. They would help us finance facilities or construction of facilities, and it would be through a connection with a bank. The negative part of that, of course, would be that the fees for doing that are relatively high, or more than what we would incur if we had if a bond was issued. But that is a possible source of funding as well. But there were a number. We probably looked at over 200 different sources for funding. But again, primarily it was for equipment and furnishings and so forth. The other, and those funds could be used to help offset the entire cost of a project, obviously, and that would be definitely something to look at once the board determines what projects they would like to do in what order. I did have our finance director, Brittany White, do some calculations for funding the, if there was a desire to bond this. To bond to do a bond on $1 million, if we bonded it, or I'm sorry, for the, let me look at my sheet here. The debt service on $1 million, if we bonded it, let's just say for 10 years, you'd have a 0.038 increase in the millage in order to cover that, bond. And that would be per million. Now, if we looked at bonding for all of these projects, and we estimated an annual, or the total of that, it being at 65 million, because we really need to nail down, but that was based on the estimates, that was based on the information we were given, and then just based on some estimates that we had for some construction. But if that were to be the case, let's just assume that that was the case to cover all of the construction costs. A 30-year, 10-year bond of 65 million would require that we increase the millage rate by 2.44 mils. If we stretched it out over 30 years, we could drop that down to a little over a mil, 1.02 mils. And that's just to pay the debt service. And again, we don't know exactly what that number is because we haven't really vetted all of those construction estimates. And then too, there may be certain portions of some of these projects that may not really be eligible for bonding. For instance, programming is not something that is bondable. Now, programming, there is dollars available for grant dollars available for program funding, but not as a bond. So so we've looked at several of these things, and what I would, in my memo, I made a recommendation that what we would need to do, and Commissioner or Chairman Mason and Chairman Baines and I spoke yesterday, and we thought it might be best for us to have a workshop to discuss really fully in-depth what we might be able to, what parts of a project we might be able to get grant funding for, how much that would be, and then to discuss some more concrete numbers in terms of the costs of the projects, and also to determine what we think would be the operations and maintenance costs once the projects would be completed. But I think that one of the things that we did discover is that there's no silver bullet here to fund all of the projects. I mean, and that there would be that a better approach, and my recommendation would be to determine what the priorities are, and then to determine how we want to, exactly how we want to fund something. What combination of funding sources do we want to use? A general fund? Do we want to use SPLOST? Do we want to see what part grant funding might play in that rather? Or did the board want to consider at all necessarily trying to, and I don't think this is the case, but whether or not there was any desire to take a look at trying to fund all of the projects at one time, and then seeing what that final number might have impact on the millage rate and our ability to service the debt. But I think there's a lot of decisions that really need to be made before we can really move any further on the projects. The other thing that I would recommend is that in the effort to find grant funding, I would recommend that we take a look at contracting with a professional company or person or persons on a contingency basis to seek out grants, and then they would only be paid based on what the grant amounts, a percentage based on the grant amount that we would obtain. Because writing a grant is not an easy thing to do, and the other challenge with grants is making sure that you don't waste time applying for a grant where there's not going to be but very, very little possibility of success in you getting the money. The grants that we saw range anywhere from a few $100s to several $100,000. And again, the biggest ones that we saw that would probably be applicable to us are the ones for trail development. But you can sometimes spend as much time writing a grant for $100,000 as you can one for $2,500. So it's important, I think, that we would engage somebody to help us do that. And then beyond that, we would also need to look at the possibility of hiring additional personnel to manage the grants. Once you do receive a grant, there's quite a bit of reporting and accounting that has to be done in order to make sure, particularly with federal grants, that all of the expenditures are eligible and that they've all been treated appropriately, and that if there are contracts involved and you're paying contracts with federal grant money, there's certain stipulations in the contracting that you've got to follow as well. So we'd want to make sure that we had not only somebody to assist in obtaining the grant, but also then on the back end to help us manage that grant or grants once they might be received. So I really think the next step for us would be to go through that process of looking at what the exact numbers would be, what the priority in the projects would be, and then go from there in terms of laying out a timeline on how we might be able to achieve all of this, and as importantly, how we can afford to do this without having to raise the millage rate. And I think that's going to be the key component here.
Thank you, Mr. Kerr. I'd like to open the floor for any discussion. Commissioner Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Lloyd, County Manager Lloyd, I'm just a little bit rushed around this evening, but I think I had took a look at the possible grants. I think when you put them out maybe Thursday or Friday, and then I just start talking to a lot of people, and what they were telling me, the ones who had received grants, that there was a lot of there were more COVID-19 grants out there than most of the grants that we are looking for. And I was and I'm a newsman addict. I watched probably all three stations. I toggle here, toggle there. But they did a list of counties in the state of Georgia, and they said that we, Newton County, and if you could maybe look at it and report back to us, that we was the county that was giving out the least amount of shots in the state of Georgia. And that worried me, because it was a lot of people calling me and said, well, how can I get my shot? How can I get my first one? How can I get my second one? They're not getting those shots. They're not even getting on the list. They're not even getting in line. So we need to pursue ASAP as many of those grants that may help us to try to help people to get in line to get those shots. Because I think for me, this is me talking, I think it's a disservice to the citizens of Newton County. We know we're needing the COVID-19 shot, especially, and just talking about the ones 65 years of age. I haven't quite got there yet, but I'll get there sometime this year, getting the shots. And then it goes on to talk about minorities, the people of color, that's what they said on TV. They're getting even less. And that should be, we should be working as hard as we can as a county, as the county seat here in Newton County, to make sure that our citizens are getting in line to get those shots and make sure that everything is available. Next thing I just want to say a little bit about talking about grants. I think any 501c3 grants that we have or have a knowledge of, I think that information should be made available to the public, because I believe there's a lot of churches and 501c3 organizations maybe could, if they could had the funding of sorts, or try to get the funding, or maybe possibly get a grant, would try to help as many of our seniors as they can. And thirdly, I think last time we talked a little bit about the seniors going over to senior services. Hey, that's only for senior services. It's not for the general public to come in and say, well, I need some assistance getting in line to get my shot, or can I talk to my, get with my doctor? So I think we're behind. We shouldn't be. And it worries me, because a lot of people I know who have passed from the COVID-19 right here in this community, and not talk about some of my kinfolks who have been close to me. So I think we need to get on the ball. We need to, what they always say, form a committee to get on the ball, because I think a lot of people's lives are at stake. And I think with the new strand that's coming, he's even putting us maybe deep behind the curve, and we should be in front of the curve as far as vaccination for our citizens in Newton County, especially the senior population. And we need to know who's getting shots and who's not. We need to set up maybe our own website to make sure that we know what's going on as far as that with grants, because it don't sound good when you hear it on TV, and it don't sound good when your neighbor down the street have died from COVID-19, and you can't even go up and sit in a church and talk about the person, tell what you have done. You're standing on the outside for their burial, you know. And so I just think we need to do more than what we're doing. Now, getting on to our grants, I think that, you know, we're here, I think, basically just to say, well, hey, we're gonna vote in the $4.some million for the fire station, I think. But what about our projects? I mean, what about District 2, District 3, and District 4, who really, our community needs a whole lot of stuff in it, and we're trying to the best of our ability to bring it to our communities. And to me, it's important. You know, it may not be important to some people, you know, maybe across town, but it's important to us. And I remember, I think it was said at one of the meetings, that we were holding them hostage. We're not holding nobody hostage. I think, I can't speak for the other commissioners, but I think we just want to slice of the pie for our community. And I think that we should be getting more help. We should be getting more help from the people who are more in charge on a day-to-day operation than what we're getting trying to get this, trying to help us in our communities. I think we should have been, and I'm gonna just say this, and I'm gonna shut up, Mr. Chairman. I think we should have had a work session. It shouldn't be us that have been trying to struggle, well, we want this. We should have had a work session. I know there was a contact with DeMond and Commissioner DeMond and Commissioner Sanders with Lloyd, and I called one or two times, but I think, you know, I just want some type of solution as far as how can we get what we need in our districts. And I think that's what we're up there for, services. Our job as a district commission, at least I was told, may be changed, I don't know, is to provide services to our community. And I think we're not providing as many services recreationally, and I know for the COVID-19, I've just been very disappointed for the health and welfare of our citizens. And that's a very bad disease. Some people it affects, some it don't. We should not provide those services to our community. And I'm hoping that we can.
Commissioner, I don't mean it. Did you have something specific about this particular, because we want to make sure that we stay on track?
Well, yes, I'm
Okay.
hoping that when we bond, that we give that all 5 of our districts, all our districts, District 1, District 2, District 3, and District 4, I'm hoping that we will be able to bond some money in order to at least start working on our projects, that one that we had presented to the to Lloyd, our county manager.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. And I'll jump in real quick. I think what our county manager is kind of opposing is that we have a plan. And that plan is to basically have a work session that will bring in all of our financial entities, bring in our bonding council, bring in our finance director, bring in the board, bring in our rec director, bring in our project manager, and we all sit down and come up with a strategic plan on how we can effectively get these projects done. So I think that's the objective at this particular point. So, and I think Commissioner Sanders had something next, and then I'll come back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do agree that we do need a work session. I wish it would have been done within the 30 days that we were waiting to find out the funding, because we could have assisted with some of that. I'm really shocked that we here at Newton County don't have a dedicated grant writer that provides grant services for a county. That's something we should have definitely had on board. Many counties actually have that on board, and some actually have a committee of grant writers, is what they do all the time. So that's a really shocker for me that we don't even have one to provide grants, because that offsets the taxpayers' dollars, so we won't have to pay for so many things. In regards to, we need to, if we're going to do a work session, that date needs to be set today, because once we leave this meeting, everything is going to go down the drain. As just echoing a little bit of what Commissioner Henderson stated, and I want the citizens to hear this, and I only can speak on the district that I actually reside in for almost 14 years. We have no resources. And I don't know if any of the citizens have ever driven through all of District 3. We have no resources. As you know, you see all the homes are being built over in that district, about to have 1,025 about to come. There's another townhome that's being proposed. There's another apartment complex being proposed, and we have majority of the kids on the west side. And there is nothing for these kids to do. I just recently got out of a meeting with Family Connection, and I heard of the stats for Newton County, that our children are high in rate of STDs, that our children are below the average rate of the state of Georgia in literacy. And one of the reasons was because our kids have nothing to do. So when you have nothing to do as a child, what? You get in something negative, something that's not constructive, because you have nothing for them to do. And that's what's happening on the west side. We're not just pushing for an agenda because we want it. Our citizens have been asking for that. Before I even stepped into office, I'm a parent in this district, I'm a parent in this county, and I see those things that are not offered to our kids. Sitting up on this platform, it's our responsibility to take care of all of the citizens in Newton County, not just certain areas, not just certain demographics, to take care of everyone in Newton County to make sure that we have what we need to take care of our kids. It takes a village, not just a district, not just the area, it takes a village. And because we don't have those things in our district, our numbers are constantly increasing because we are failing our youth, we're failing our seniors, we're failing our people. So if there's going to be a work session, it should have been done before we even came to this meeting, but that date needs to be set today. Each home that's built in any district, they pay almost $3,800 per home for a permit. Where are those funds going? Where are they going? They need to go back into the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, and I guess this question is to legal. Could we, and this is me talking, could we bond some additional monies? And before And before we goes back to the Board of Commissioners, could we have that work session and kind of figure out, where we're going?
If you all, sorry, if you all are going to do a work session, I think we should do it per district so that we can make sure, like in District 2, you need this, then we get a number, a total, same for 3 and 4. And then we reach out to bond counsel, who's actually here tonight, and would help us to bond those projects. I mean, from what I'm hearing, doesn't appear to be a whole lot of grants available. So if you want to make those projects happen,
Right.
They're not on the referendum from SPLOST.
Right. What I was maybe suggesting or speaking on is the fact that we go ahead and bond we would bump up District 1 to $5 million, and then in 2, 3, and 4, we would bump us up to $5 million. And what that would do, that would give us the seed money to at least start on those projects, and there would be a total of $20 million. Now, it's my understanding that we have a surplus, and Lord, maybe you can help me, or maybe just a rumor, that we have a surplus at this point in the general fund of $20 million. And so I think that by itself, from my thinking, it could hold some of that money to offset what I would like to see. And that would assure us that between now and maybe not this meeting, the next meeting, when the board come together and we raise our hand for that $15 million, if the board pleasure, that we will have that on the table, at least so District 2 could look at maybe with their $5 million, some of the main stuff that you might want to do. You might want to do some more additional plans. You may want to do something, and he would have that money to do it if we approve it. And so could Commissioner Sanders. She would have that additional $5 million to do something in her part that she wanted done, and mean it to do something towards the early voting over at our cousins, and maybe a little bit in our district, until maybe we start seeing some of those grants come aboard, or we talk about them. But just let me say this about grant writers, a little bit that I do know from this board, from this seat, was a few years ago when we got a grant writer, and he was when Commissioner Sim was the District 2 commissioner. I think the total thing, and I told Lord about this, was $50,000 we paid them to write grants. And the only grant that we got was one that I got from Nelson Heights, which is a 501c3, to help the citizens over on a part of my side of town. It was $1,000, and that's something I could have went over and had been receiving every year prior to that, up to that year. So I think that if we're going to do, this is my opinion, if we're going to do grants, it should be on maybe 5 or 10% of what a grant they bring in, so that you would pay them for them doing something rather than receiving a check and doing nothing.
Thank you, sir. Was there any other discussion, or Lord, Mr. Kerr, was there anything that you wanted to address that I think Commissioner Henderson, I don't know if there was anything that he said that you wanted to or needed to address?
I would, I'm not sure that, one, and I'll have to defer to legal on this, but I believe there would have to be some kind of an indication as to that we could not just add dollars to this, because we have to have a project attached to it that we would have to bond. And I would recommend that we take the time to determine if indeed you do want to bond these, that you take the time to determine what project you're talking about and what is the budget, the total dollar amount to do whatever portion of that project is. And then also, again, we got to go back to make sure that we have the funding in order to pay the debt service on it. The bond for the fire department is being paid out of the 271 fund, which is the fire tax fund. So it is a dedicated, we do have dedicated funding already for that. And those funds are typically used for personnel and equipment and so forth for the fire department. And so we do receive enough funding, enough collections in order to pay the debt service on this particular bond. So we're not having to increase anything to pay for that bond because the money is already there. And we have actually budgeted it in, because we anticipated paying, to begin making payments during this fiscal year. We did budget that into our budget this year. So I hesitate. I think we need to take the time to make sure that if you are going to do something in the way of a bond, that we answer all those questions first before you would need to do that. Find just decide what project or projects, and then we would also need to discuss where we would get the funding for it.
Thank you, sir. I wanted to check in with Commissioner Cowan. Was there anything, he's actually joining us via telephone, was there anything that you wanted to add, Commissioner Cowan?
The only thing I've had a hard time hearing anything on the discussion, but I would think all these projects, and Mr. Chairman, I discussed it with you, maybe having this as part of our strategic plan session, just to set aside a special time for discussion of projects and funding. So I have not heard the other discussions yet. It's just hard to hear on the phone, but that's the only thing I would recommend that people consider.
Thank you, Commissioner. Was there any other discussion? Yes, sir.
Well, Mr. Chairman, thank you first. I thought that when we present the projects to our county manager for him to look at them, I thought that he was going to look at them and he would come back to us and he would say, this is what I think, what we should do. And what we're getting here this evening is saying, well, hey, we got to put off into a later date. And I don't think it should be put off. I think we should set aside that money, and we asked him to find a way, because I can't. I said, I'm not working here on a daily basis. He should find a way for us to at least secure $5 million for our projects. Right? Now, what I'm saying, I'm just only one commissioner, but I thought that it was, if the citizens, and he said, we have a district commission, why are we going to have all these meetings in the district when the district have already told us what they want? I mean, I know they have me, so we're going to have meeting after meeting, and after a while they're going to be like, it used to be, say, you wear them down, and they forget about the project. But I don't want to forget about this project. It's very important to the citizen District 4. I can't speak for the other districts, and I think we need to go ahead and bond all our monies on this, and we asked our county manager, who is very knowledgeable, and has worked on, I know the fire station project for maybe a year or two, and made sure that it is going to be funded, make sure we got an additional fire station, make sure we have people to man that fire station. It was no wait. I'm on the board. I think y'all were, I know Commissioner Sanders was not here. There was no wait. We just went on. He figured out a way to do it. And that's all I'm asking. Do the same for me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Thank you. And I want to add, I think that's the objective. I don't want to get into a comparison of projects against projects, but I know that we actually approved the fire station last year, I believe in July. So we've kind of had some time to work on it. And so I think what our county manager is proposing now, that same time that was afforded for the fire station, if we can give that same length of time to these projects so that we can be fiscally responsible. So we're not just bonding projects, because it's a possibility that we can find monies where we don't have to bond any of the monies. We may be able to find grants. We may qualify for corporate sponsorships or private investors that want, or even state dollars. And so I think what we want to do is, because the thing is that what we don't want to do, and I want to put this out there to our citizens, we don't want to raise the millage rate. We're not trying to increase property taxes. That is something that we're not trying to do. But at the same token, we want to make sure that the citizens in these districts actually get these projects successfully completed. And I think by sitting down, having that work session, and Lord, maybe we can talk to our chairman, this upcoming retreat that we're having, maybe we can set aside some time during that retreat where we can invite all of those parties in and just sit down and plan, not to say that we forget about the projects, but we plan accordingly to say, can we find any other monies outside of bonding? And then if we do find the majority of the money, and say we may have, $1 million or $2 million or something left that we can't find funding for, then we can come back to this board and say we were able to find all the money except for this particular amount. Now can we go through a process of potentially bonding whatever is left, versus saying let's bond some up front and not have a financial plan on how we can actually come up with the other dollars. So I think we were kind of working in reverse. So if we just change our direction and start trying to find other ways to fund these particular projects, and then if we have some left, come back and say, okay, bond it. If we do need to bond a certain amount, how much is that going to, are we going to have to raise the millage rate, or we're not going to have to raise the millage rate, because the objective is not to raise the millage rate. And I think that is what I want to put to this particular board, that is our objective, is that we have it within our budget, whether it comes from general fund, whether it comes from grants, whether it comes from SPLOST, what other financial resources can we utilize to actually fund these projects without bonding, and let bonding be the last resort. So I think that's the objective. Yes, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this, this comment is to Lord, whomever may know it. How much do we have a $20 million surplus in general fund at this point?
I'm sorry. The question is, how much money do we have in reserve?
Turn this back on. Because I was told that there's a $20 million of surplus monies in general fund.
We have actually a little over 22 million in our reserve. Our goal currently is to get to 25 million, which is what has been recommended by our auditors, in order to have sufficient operating cash in the event that there were some kind of catastrophe.
Correct.
And so but we are at 22. We've worked very hard over the last 5 years in order to get there. And so we don't want to have to tap into that unless of course the board absolutely directs us to do so.
So I have one question: what percentage of our budget might that 22 million be?
22 million would be about 30% of the budget.
Okay. So I was told when I guess back home folks said the amount of money that the county should be around 10, and at the most 15%. So I guess, I mean, if I'm wrong, please correct me.
Well, each county kind of can set their own objective. Our objective, or let me back up. Good accounting practice would say that you would want to conserve, or that you would want to have in reserve, I believe it's a minimum of 22%. So we're a little above that right now, but that would be, but again, the idea is that if we did run into difficulty, for instance, if, and God forbid this happens, but if we had another crash like we did in 2008, that is when the cash reserves of the county were depleted pretty significantly. When I first took this job, I believe we had less than, somewhere in the neighborhood of $3 million in reserve. And it was very important that we build that reserve again, because that will help us should something like that happen. That, of course, would help us to be able to operate without having to do the severe layoffs and cutbacks that the county had to do during the 2008 to 2013 or 14 period. So that's the reason why we continue to build it. Some counties don't put as much a priority, or they believe that they have other sources of revenue to help make up in the event that there is. But that's an individual decision for the county. And again, we're using what are considered best accounting practices, and then also considering the recommendation from our auditors.
Thank you, Lord. I want to jump in because
Could I
we
ask one
we
final
only got
question?
we only got 10 more minutes, and I know we have a couple more items. So I kind of want to move forward so that but I wanted to say, Lloyd, we had talked to Commissioner Sanders. I talked about a date. Is there a date that we can put on the calendar today that will bring in where we can have that work session, or are we able to do it through our upcoming retreat?
I don't believe that we would have enough time during the upcoming retreat. To be quite honest, we've got a lot of things to go over. So I would think that if you wanted to do it before a regularly scheduled meeting, or it depends on how long you think that the workshop, how much time you think that the board needs to come through and make some decisions. I could have all of the information I think I need, and some of it has to do with scheduling, of course, and I'm sorry, I say all that to say somewhere between, I would say probably at least into March, middle of April, maybe our second meeting in April, if you wanted to do it on the date of a meeting.
So we may need, because I think our attorney talked about maybe breaking them out versus doing them all at once so that they'll be.
I just think it would be overwhelming for us to try to get the amount of money in exactly what project you want. If you do one work session with all of these, let's say you start with District 2. By the time we get to Commissioner Henderson, everybody is going to be sitting here 2 hours, and
Right,
you're not going to have
right.
productivity. That was why my suggestion was that way. We don't have to have special called meetings on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and it doesn't have to be at 7. We could come up with a schedule that works for you all, and so that you present your project. If the PFA votes to approve it, we take it to the BOC, because the BOC obviously backs it. That way we could identify each project, similar to what Commissioner Henderson said with the $5 million, $5 million, $5 million. Identify the projects, know exactly what it's going to cost. We don't want to get into a situation like we did with our courthouse. We ended up we thought it was going to be this, and it was just a quick movement, and it doubled. So it behooves everyone that we get the numbers right, so that we don't have to keep coming back and changing it over and over again. But that was just, I thought for housekeeping, it'd be easier to do it by district.
So I think that'll be a great idea if we can do it by district. Did you want to add?
I was just going to ask, just for clarity, so are we looking at funding $5 million worth of projects, or are we looking at all of the eligible projects?
We're looking at basically all of the projects to see what are the funding sources before we talk about bonding.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
No, it does, but I guess the question is how much, because obviously we're going to need to have some kind of a dollar amount. So, for instance, currently Commissioner Henderson has, I believe, $16 million
Right.
in So are you looking for the total 16 million?
I think what we can do is, once we have those individual sessions, I think that's
Go back
something that
in.
we can discuss
Okay.
and talk about and break those projects apart and kind of
Okay.
see where do we begin, where do we start, and that
Okay.
give us a strategic plan, basically,
Okay.
for each one.
Since he missed this before, may I say something concerning that?
Yes, sir, if you can do
It'll
that
be
rather
fast.
quickly.
It'll be fast.
Thank you.
Well, one of the first thing I want to know, what do ACCG says about a 22% of fund balance? What is their recommended fund balance for a county? And secondly, we're talking about this for in the project. What I was suggesting or trying to tell the board was that each of the districts should have $5 million, and they go into what we think that how that $5 million should be spent. With the idea or plan is for you to go out, or Dwayne or whomever, go out and try to get additional funding, maybe through grants or other stuff, et cetera.
Thank you, sir. So, Lloyd, you're saying maybe because I know we have our retreat, towards the end of March? I think it's actually the middle part of March.
That's fine. If, I would say at least towards the end of March to try to schedule something. Again, it wouldn't necessarily have to be, as Megan said, on the day of the board meeting. It can be
Right.
another day that works for everybody's schedule. And once we have a date, then I can start working on seeing who
So
can
I
be
guess
here.
we can, because Commissioner Sanders, did you have a date in mind that you wanted to propose? I don't know what will be best for everybody.
It's 30 days from, well,
Today?
no, we don't need to do 30 days. Let's do about 2 weeks from today.
So that'll actually be the beginning of March. So we're looking at maybe towards the end of March. So after our retreat, so I guess would we want to do it,
Because if we're having a meeting, there needs to be some structure. We can't just have a meeting and he
Right.
doesn't know, or we don't know what the meeting is about. We're just going to be sitting there wasting time.
well, no, it's going to be, what we're going to do is break it up. The first meeting will be, for one of the districts. And then we want to also make sure that we can reach out to all those entities to see if their schedule, where they'll actually be able to be there in attendance. So like our bonding council, make sure they can be there, make sure our finance director can be there, make sure all parties can be there, rec director, so they can all be at that session.
So what are we going to, I'm sorry, did you acknowledge me? I know.
Yes, go ahead.
What are we going to do in the meantime to make sure that we have grant writers who are accessible to us? Because that needs to also be at the meeting.
Yes, and Mr. Kerr, I think you're going to go ahead are you going to start working on that now?
The grant writer, we can
Yes.
take to see, I mean, again, there's a funding issue there because it's not, that position's not in the budget.
Okay.
So we can take a look, and we would need to do what we need to do in order to fund that. So I'd have to see about funding, about how quickly we could do it.
Commissioner
Some
Sampson?
grant writers are contractors. They
Yes,
base them on what they find and get a percentage of the
Right.
dollars. So
And-
it may not cost the taxpayers money until that grant is
Right.
found.
And that's what I'd like to do on the grant writer side. It's the other side, the management or administrative side, that where we would be hiring an employee to manage those. But yeah, the writers themselves, that needs to be on a contingency basis.
So would it be okay, because
So
I
I
think
can-
you mentioned,
I'm
I'm sorry, go ahead. You mentioned Thursdays, right?
Thursday's
Thursdays?
fine. That's
Okay,
fine.
so what about April the 1st? That'll be the first Thursday in April. Would that work? No, that doesn't work?
So
Okay.
they also, yes, she moved the retreat, but that
Okay.
Saturday of the first time that we were supposed to have the retreat, that's open. What was that, March 17th week?
So it's-
That Saturday is open.
So what about Thursday the 18th? So is,
No. Well, I won't be.
okay. Oh, that's right, I
Yeah.
forgot. Okay,
That's what's in it.
That's right. And then that following Thursday, I think I heard that. Okay, the end of April. End of March. It's my March.
Is a Saturday not good for anybody?
Okay.
Sa-
So
Saturday?
is Saturday good for everybody?
I'm good with it.
I'm hearing no, shaking heads no.
I'm
So
sorry,
we want
no,
to do it during
not
the
for
week?
me.
Okay.
Um,
So what about Thursday the 8th, that following week, April the 8th? Is that
I'm,
April the 8th work?
that's fine.
Thursday, April the 8th. Yes, we're going to do one district on the 8th.
Let's go ahead and set the time. So we have it set.
Yes.
Yeah.
So do we want to just do 6 o'clock? 6 o'clock works on the 8th? Okay. And sure, Commissioner Henderson, you want to start with 4? We can start with District 4 on that day. Okay, great. So I seek a motion that we're going to basically set up a work session for these particular projects starting on April the 8th at 6 o'clock p.m. with District 4, and then we'll begin to put together a plan for each individual district.
So move the chair.
Thank you. Is there a second? So I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Commissioner Cowan, are you in favor of moving these projects to the first meeting, April 8th at 6 o'clock p.m. to start working on District 4 plan?
Is that after the strategic planning session or before?
It's after.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I support that.
Okay. All opposed? So that passes 5-0.
Lord, in the meantime, I know we got to go. In the meantime, could we sit in? I've talked to the mayor of Covington, Mayor Horton, and we want to know a date that we can go in over Cousins and look at the, I guess they got some kind of storage room and stuff in there, and look at it, and so we'll know exactly what it would cost to at least start on that early voting over the station over there.
Sure, yes, sir.
Thank you. So we'll move on to item number 6, to consider and approve resolution R021621, a resolution to provide for the issuance of a Newton County Public Facilities Authority revenue bond for Fire Station Number 4, an equipment project to authorize an installment sale agreement with Newton County, authorize a placement agent agreement with Stifel, Nicholas and Company, and for related purposes. I seek a motion. Thank you. Thank you. So we have a motion by,
I think you said it before I did.
yes, a motion by Commissioner Henderson and a second by Commissioner Edwards. Yes. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to make sure one thing, Lloyd. So, Commissioner Sanders, Station 8 has been with, they're lacking a fire truck. This will take care of that too, right?
That's correct. Actually, we are purchasing that fire truck because it's being delivered shortly with existing dollars that are in the fire, or that are in the fire fund, and we will reimburse that fund once we get the proceeds from the bond.
All right. Thank you, Lloyd. I just want to make sure that they've been without a fire station up there for quite a while too. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Yes, sir.
I just want to repeat what I think I said from the beginning. If I didn't say it, I'm saying it now. At no point, and I think you had mentioned it earlier, when we're holding that fire station hostage, my point was that there are other needs throughout the county, and it's my job as a district commissioner is to make sure that those needs are addressed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. All in favor of approving this resolution? Commissioner Cowan, are you in favor?
Yes.
All opposed? All right, that passes 5-0. Item number 7, consider and approve tax-exempt debt policy for Public Facilities Authority. Ms. Martin.
Thank you, Chairman Mason. As you all may recall, when Sam was here last time, Bond Council has recommended that we adopt this policy. I think you've actually seen it from Sam. The policy basically says that the authority will require Newton County to adopt its own tax-exempt debt policy. The county's policy is already in existence. It was adopted in 2012. Fortunately, Brittany does have a copy of that. So the adoption of this policy is merely a formality since it has just been shelved, in other words. So no actual changes will be taking place. If you have any questions, I will be happy to answer those for you.
Thank you. I'm going to open it for any discussion on this particular item. All right, since there's no discussion, I seek a motion for this item. Thank you, sir. Is there a second? Thank you, sir. So we have a motion and a second to approve the tax-exempt debt policy for the Public Facilities Authority. All in favor? Commissioner Cowan?
Yes.
All opposed? That item passes 5-0. And I seek a motion to adjourn. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. So we have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor? Commissioner Cowan? All in favor to adjourn? All opposed? Thank you. We're adjourned.